There are corners of Rick Sanchez's mind that no one has ever seen, corners where the noise finally quiets, and the thoughts he never speaks drift in slow circles. Rick is loud by design, chaotic by habit, and sharp because sharpness keeps people at a distance. But beneath the inventions and the sarcasm and the constant movement, there is a place inside him that feels almost silent, a space he rarely visits because visiting it hurts. This is the place where his quiet thoughts live, thoughts that never make it to the surface, thoughts that reveal the weight he carries even when he seems untouchable. Rick understands that his mind is a storm, always shifting, always burning through ideas before they can settle. He moves quickly, not because speed excites him, but because slowing down gives his thoughts room to take shape, and that is the last thing he wants. The moment he slows down, the silence creeps in. In that silence, he finds memory, regret, grief, longing, and the crushing realization that intelligence cannot protect him from himself. Rick knows the truth too well. The smartest man in the universe is still a man, and a man alone with his thoughts can unravel faster than any machine he builds. In these quiet spaces, Rick often finds himself thinking about his younger self, a version of him that still believed discovery could save him. He remembers being fascinated by possibility, excited by the unknown, driven by a hunger that felt pure. Now that hunger feels like a chain. Rick wonders sometimes when exactly the shift happened, when curiosity stopped being a thirst for understanding and became a distraction from pain. He wonders if he ever chose this path, or if it happened gradually, a series of small concessions he never noticed until it was too late. Rick's quiet thoughts are rarely dramatic. They are simple in a way that surprises him. He thinks about family. He thinks about what stability might have looked like. He thinks about mornings he never lived, mornings where he woke up without dread pressing against his ribs. These thoughts appear softly and vanish just as quietly, like ripples on a lake. Rick never gives them time to grow because growth requires vulnerability. Vulnerability requires acceptance. Acceptance requires admitting he lost things he cannot get back. There are nights when Rick allows himself to sit with these thoughts for a moment longer than usual. He stares at his hands and sees every tremor he has tried to hide. He stares at the ceiling and lets himself feel the tiredness he pretends he does not have. In these moments, he is painfully aware that he has built his life around movement because stillness feels dangerous. When he is still, he feels the weight of everything he has avoided. He feels the truth he keeps buried. He feels how long he has been running. Rick also thinks about Morty more often than he admits. He wonders if bringing Morty into his world was selfish or necessary. He wonders if Morty understands how much Rick relies on him without ever saying it. He wonders if Morty sees the fear behind the bravado. These thoughts trouble him because they expose the softest part of his mind, the part that still cares despite every attempt to smother that instinct. Caring makes him vulnerable. Vulnerability makes him break. Rick knows this, yet the caring remains. It sits quietly, pushing against the walls he built around his heart. Rick's quiet thoughts often drift toward memory, but memory is a place he avoids. Memories remind him of people he lost, people he pushed away, people he failed to protect. He hides these memories behind his inventions, burying them under logic and noise. But late at night, when the garage is still and the glow of his machines dims, memories slip through the cracks. He remembers laughter he once shared. He remembers promises he once made. He remembers moments when he believed he could be better. These memories hurt because they remind him of what could have been. He sometimes thinks about what it would feel like to stop running, to let himself rest, to allow the world to exist without constantly demanding something from him. But the thought never lasts long. Rick knows too much about the universe to trust peace. Peace feels like a trick. Peace feels like a fragile illusion. Peace feels like something that breaks the moment he lets his guard down. His quiet thoughts reveal a truth he never speaks. Rick is tired, not of the universe, but of himself. In these silent spaces, Rick also confronts the emptiness he hides. He built a life full of chaos, danger, invention, and distraction. But when everything fades, he is left with a hollow center he cannot fill. No adventure can plug it. No victory can erase it. No knowledge can soothe it. Rick sometimes wonders if this emptiness is punishment, or if it is simply the natural result of living too fast and feeling too little for too long. He wonders whether the emptiness has always been there, and he simply never noticed until his mind slowed enough to hear its echo. Rick's quiet thoughts show him the parts of himself he does not want to accept, the failures, the guilt, the longing, the hope he refuses to admit he still has. Hope terrifies Rick more than despair. Hope means risking attachment. Hope means risking loss. Hope means risking the possibility that he could change, and the fear of that change weighs heavily on him. In the quiet moments, he catches himself, wondering if he deserves better, then immediately shuts the thought down because deserving is a concept he abandoned years ago. Despite his fear of vulnerability, Rick's quiet thoughts always return to one hidden truth. He wishes he could stop hurting people. He wishes he could stop hurting himself. He wishes he could stop running. These wishes appear faintly, almost unintentionally, as if his mind whispers them before his defenses pull them back down. He never speaks these desires. He buries them under sarcasm and danger and brilliance. But the desires remain. They linger in the quiet like ghosts waiting to be acknowledged. Rick does not know how to live gently. He knows how to survive. He knows how to dominate. He knows how to escape. But gentleness requires a kind of courage he does not trust himself to have. In his quiet thoughts, he sometimes imagines what gentleness might feel like. A morning where he wakes without panic. A conversation where he speaks honestly. A moment where he lets someone stay instead of pushing them away. These imaginings sting because they reveal a life he refuses to believe he deserves. There is a moment Rick experiences, often when he is alone, a moment that reveals the deepest layer of his quiet thoughts. He feels something rising inside him, a feeling he tries to suppress, a feeling that surfaces anyway. It is not sadness, it is not anger, it is not despair, it is longing. A longing for peace, for connection, for rest, a longing for a version of himself he cannot become. Rick feels this longing for an instant, then crushes it with logic, but the longing returns, gentle and persistent, reminding him that no amount of intelligence can erase the human parts of him. Rick fears these quiet thoughts because they reveal everything he hides. They show him the cost of his choices. They show him the parts of himself that still feel. They show him the future he avoids. They show him the truth that beneath all the noise, he is lonely in ways he cannot outrun. The quiet thoughts tell him what he refuses to say out loud. He wants to be someone worth staying for, but he does not know how to become that person. At night, when Rick finally falls asleep, after drowning his thoughts in invention or distraction, the quiet returns. It waits for him. It settles in the spaces between breaths. It reminds him that no matter how fast he runs, his mind will always follow. And in that quiet, Rick grows in ways he never acknowledges, not through change but through the awareness that change is possible, even if he never admits it. Inside Rick Sanchez's mind, unfinished thoughts drift like loose wires. They spark, flicker, fade, and return without warning. Rick thinks faster than anyone around him, but that speed comes with a cost. For every idea he completes, there are 100 that he abandons halfway through. Not because they lack meaning, but because meaning demands attention he refuses to give. These unfinished thoughts form their own language, a quiet system of signals he never translates aloud. They reveal the fears he avoids, the regrets he buries, and the questions he asks, only when no one is there to hear the answer. Rick begins many thoughts with conviction. He starts analyzing an invention, a theory, a flaw he sees in the universe. But somewhere halfway through, the thought touches something personal, a memory, a loss, a possibility, a fear, and Rick pulls away from it without even realizing what he is avoiding. His intelligence does not make him fearless. His intelligence makes his fears clearer, sharper, harder to escape. So he leaves the thought unfinished. He moves to the next distraction before honesty catches up to him. One of his quiet, unfinished thoughts is always the same. He wonders what his life would look like if he had allowed himself to stay somewhere, not physically, but emotionally. He wonders what stability might have felt like. He imagines simple routines, connections that did not require constant explanation. Mornings where he woke up without preparing for disaster. These thoughts begin softly. They drift through his mind like small questions. But before they can grow into a complete picture, Rick cuts them short. Stability requires trust. Trust requires vulnerability. Vulnerability leads to pain. Rick refuses to let the thought reach that conclusion, so he stops it halfway. Another unfinished thought appears whenever he watches Morty. Rick sees Morty's reactions, Morty's fear, Morty's sincerity, Morty's confusion. He starts to think about what Morty needs, what Morty feels, what Morty is learning too quickly. But acknowledging Morty's emotional growth forces Rick to confront something he never admits. Rick knows he is shaping Morty in ways he cannot undo. He knows Morty is becoming someone who carries too much. He knows Morty deserves better guidance than he receives. These thoughts rise in him like smoke, but Rick pushes them away before they form a truth he is not ready to face. His mind also begins thoughts about family, but these are the ones he shuts down the fastest. He thinks about Beth without wanting to. He thinks about what she remembers, what she hides, what she inherited from him. He thinks about every missed moment, every conversation that drifted into silence instead of connection. These thoughts strike him unexpectedly when he sees her hands tremble or hears her voice crack. He recognizes the signs of emotional weight because he carries them too. But when the thought reaches the part where he would have to admit how much of this is his fault, he closes it off instantly and moves on. Rick's unfinished thoughts about his past are the most painful. He remembers ideas he abandoned decades ago, not because they were impossible, but because they meant confronting who he was at the time. He remembers friendships that ended abruptly. He remembers parts of himself that died slowly. He remembers moments that could have changed him for the better if he had let them. These thoughts approach him carefully, like shadows creeping toward the edge of a light. The moment they reach something too real, Rick shuts them out. Not out of arrogance, but out of fear that remembering will collapse the fragile balance he has worked to maintain. There is another category of unfinished thoughts that Rick rarely acknowledges. These are the questions about meaning. He starts to think about purpose, about existence, about why he keeps going despite claiming that nothing matters. The questions hover near him, asking whether his life has direction or whether he is drifting through the universe, because stopping is too frightening. Rick begins these thoughts with curiosity, but the moment they reach the possibility that meaning might exist, he stops. If meaning exists, then attachment has value. If attachment has value, then losing it hurts. Rick cannot accept that cycle without breaking. So the thought never finishes. He also has unfinished thoughts about himself, ones that begin with self-reflection. He considers his behavior, his reactions, his patterns. He wonders why he sabotages moments of peace. He wonders why he pushes away the people who try to stay. He wonders whether the armor he built protects him or traps him. These thoughts grow slowly, revealing truths he knows but never speaks. But when they reach the part where accountability begins, when the thought asks him to take responsibility for the pain he caused, Rick stops. He refuses to follow the thought to its conclusion, because conclusions demand change. Sometimes Rick lets an unfinished thought linger longer than usual. These moments happen late at night, when the lights dim and the machines stop humming. The silence around him makes it harder to escape his mind. He begins thinking about what it would feel like to let someone understand him, to speak honestly, to admit fear, to ask for help. He tries to imagine opening up, even for a moment, but the moment the thought touches the edge of vulnerability, he retreats. Opening up means letting someone see how fragile he really is. And fragility is the one thing he cannot allow. Rick's unfinished thoughts also involve hope, although he never labels it that way. He imagines small improvements in himself. He imagines futures where he feels less weighed down. He imagines developing habits that protect him instead of harming him. These thoughts are faint, almost whispers. They appear for seconds at a time, then fade before he can consider them seriously. Hope requires belief. Belief requires trust. Trust requires letting go of cynicism. Rick cannot finish these thoughts, because finishing them would mean admitting he still wants something better. The most haunting unfinished thought is the one he carries at the center of his mind, the one he never lets himself complete. It begins as a question, not about science, not about danger, not about adventure, but about himself. The question asks whether he could change if he tried, whether he has the capacity to grow, whether the walls he built could be lowered, whether life could feel different if he let it. Rick refuses to let the thought reach its ending because endings demand courage. He fears the answer because the answer might reveal something he has been avoiding for years. It might reveal that he has been wrong about himself. It might reveal that he could have lived differently. It might reveal that he still has a chance to be someone else. That possibility terrifies him because possibility is a doorway, and Rick has spent his life closing doorways, not opening them. In the quiet moments, Rick feels the unfinished thoughts, collecting in him like fragments of a truth he refuses to assemble. They do not disappear. They sit beneath him, shaping his behavior, influencing his reactions, guiding his silence. Morty sometimes catches glimpses of this, but Rick hides it well. He hides these thoughts because finishing them would force him to confront the parts of himself that still feel, the parts he pretends no longer exist. At night, when he lies down after a long day of avoiding himself, the unfinished thoughts settle gently. They wait. They remind him that no matter how many dimensions he travels through, he cannot escape the thoughts he never finishes. They are the quiet truth inside him, the truth that reveals who he could be if he ever stopped running. Rick Sanchez likes to act as if feelings are beneath him, as if emotion is a distraction he left behind long ago. He speaks like he is above caring, above hurting, above all the fragile human instincts everyone else struggles with. But the truth is that Rick feels constantly. He feels intensely. He feels more than he admits, more than he allows, more than he can manage. The difference is that he has trained himself to bury every emotion before it reaches the surface. The moments that move him, soften him, shake him, or crack him are the moments he pretends not to feel. These hidden reactions give shape to the quiet thoughts he never expresses. Rick's emotions arrive quickly, like flashes of lightning. They hit him before he has time to brace himself, so he masks them instinctively. When Morty says something sincere, Rick feels a small pulse of warmth, but he covers it with a joke. When Summer challenges him with unexpected strength, he feels pride, but he tosses out a dismissive comment to hide it. When Beth looks at him with a mixture of longing and confusion, Rick feels something tighten in his chest, but he shifts the conversation before it can deepen. Every meaningful moment touches him before he can defend himself, and the defense he chooses is always detachment. There is a part of Rick that still reacts like a parent, like someone who cares more than he wants to admit. When Morty panics, Rick feels fear, not for himself, but for Morty. He moves quickly to protect him, to shield him, to guide him even as he complains about it. The fear is real, but Rick buries it beneath logic. He tells himself he is reacting strategically, not emotionally. He tells himself that fear is unnecessary, but inside, fear flares whenever Morty is at risk. Rick pretends not to feel it, but he feels it every time. Another moment he hides is admiration. Rick admires strength in others, especially when it comes from unexpected places. When Summer faces a dangerous situation with confidence, he feels a spark of respect, a small recognition that she has grown in ways he did not expect. When Beth asserts herself, he sees pieces of himself in her, and it frightens him, because it reveals how deeply connected they are. When Jerry occasionally shows courage or tenderness, Rick notices. He pretends not to. He acts uninterested, but admiration flickers inside him, brief and undeniable. Rick also pretends not to feel loneliness, even though loneliness is the emotion that haunts him the most. When he walks into a room and sees his family interacting without him, he feels a pull in his chest, a quiet ache. He tells himself he prefers being alone, that company slows him down, that emotional closeness is a weakness. But the ache reveals otherwise. Loneliness visits him in the smallest moments. When he is silent for a few minutes too long, when he hears laughter that he is not part of, when he stands in his garage at night and realizes the universe does not care whether he exists. These realizations hurt him, but he pretends they do not. Guilt is another emotion Rick hides beneath layers of bravado. He feels guilty for the ways he changes Morty without meaning to. He feels guilty for the wounds Beth carries. He feels guilty for the things he abandoned, the promises he broke, the memories he cannot touch without feeling pain. This guilt arrives sharply, then dissolves into denial. Rick tells himself that guilt is pointless, that regret is for people who lack his vision, but guilt remains in him like a quiet tremor. He hides it because acknowledging it would force him to face the damage he caused. There are moments when Rick feels hope, but these moments frighten him more than any monster or enemy could. Hope makes him vulnerable. Hope makes him imagine futures he does not trust. Hope suggests that he might not be as broken as he believes. When he sees Morty succeed, a small part of him hopes Morty's life might turn out better than his own. When he sees his family sharing a warm moment, he hopes he might fit into it someday. When he feels a rare moment of peace, he hopes it might last. But hope is dangerous. Hope leads to disappointment. Rick stomps it down before it grows roots. Rick also pretends not to feel nostalgia, even though nostalgia is one of the most painful emotions he carries. Memories appear at random. A sound reminds him of someone he lost. A face reminds him of a moment he destroyed. A smell reminds him of a night that could have changed everything. Rick feels these memories in his bones, but he refuses to acknowledge them. He treats nostalgia like a virus, something that infects the mind with empathy. He shuts it down instantly, even though the memories linger quietly beneath everything he does. Anger is an emotion Rick expresses often, but he rarely shows its true source. He gets angry at problems he could solve easily. He gets angry at people who make small mistakes. He gets angry at Morty when Morty hesitates. These outbursts are surface reactions. Underneath them is a deeper anger, one aimed at himself. He feels anger toward the choices he made, toward the paths he refuses to take, toward the connections he pushes away. Rick never expresses this anger directly, because self-directed anger would force him to confront the truth that he is his own worst enemy. Another moment Rick hides is relief. When something goes right, when someone survives, when a situation resolves safely, Rick feels a wave of relief that threatens to soften him. He masks it with sarcasm or irritation, but the relief is real. It shows that he cares about outcomes, that he cares about people, that he cares about moments of safety. Yet relief frightens him because it exposes attachment. If something brings relief, losing it would bring pain. Rick cannot accept that equation without breaking, so he hides the relief behind a wall of indifference. Rick's quiet thoughts often center around the moments he pretends not to feel. They linger in him long after the moment passes. He replays conversations where he almost said something honest. He replays memories where he felt warmth before shutting it down. He replays moments where someone reached out to him and he pushed them away. These reflections come gently, not as accusations but as reminders. Reminders that he is still capable of feeling. Reminders that he is still human under all the chaos. At times, Rick catches himself smiling at something Morty says, only to force the smile away before anyone notices. He catches himself wanting to say thank you or I am proud of you, but the words never leave his mouth. He catches himself wanting to stay in the room longer, to enjoy the moment instead of running from it. These small moments reveal the truth he tries to hide. Rick does feel. He feels deeply. He feels constantly. He feels more than he allows himself to acknowledge. The silence inside him carries these feelings like hidden currents. Morty, Summer, and Beth sometimes sense these emotions, but Rick masks them so quickly that doubt replaces certainty. Rick's consistency in hiding his feelings convinces everyone, including himself, that he does not feel them, but his quiet thoughts prove otherwise. Every moment he pretends not to feel becomes a memory he stores somewhere inside, a memory that shapes him in invisible ways. Rick fears these feelings because they offer him a chance to change. They reveal paths that lead to connection, healing, and growth. But these paths demand vulnerability, and vulnerability is the one thing Rick never learned to navigate. He hides his feelings because revealing them would mean admitting he is not the invincible force he pretends to be. It would mean admitting he is just as fragile as anyone else. At night, when the house is quiet and the world stops demanding things from him, Rick feels everything he pretends not to feel. The emotions rise slowly, then settle into him like a weight. He lies there staring at the dark, letting the feelings exist without speaking them. He knows he will bury them again in the morning, but for a moment he lets them breathe. And in these moments, Rick is more honest than he is anywhere else. Inside Rick Sanchez's mind, knowledge is both a strength and a curse. He carries more understanding of the universe than anyone else alive. He knows how worlds break. He knows how civilizations collapse. He knows how life forms evolve and decay. He knows how hope can vanish in a moment and how entropy waits patiently for everything to fall apart. This knowledge gives him power, but it also burdens him in ways he never speaks about. It fills his quiet thoughts with an invisible heaviness that moves through him like a constant pressure. Rick does not fear the unknown. He fears the known, the truth he can never forget. Rick's knowledge creates a kind of isolation that no human connection can fully solve. When he listens to others speak, he often already knows the endings of their fears, the outcomes of their dreams, the fragility of their beliefs. It makes their problems feel small, even when he knows they matter to them. This disconnection makes Rick restless. It makes him impatient. But beneath the impatience lies something else, something quieter, a sadness. He wishes he could see the world through simpler eyes, without the weight of every possibility pressing on him. There are moments when Rick wishes he did not understand the universe as deeply as he does. He wishes he could be surprised by it again. He wishes he could observe something without predicting its collapse. But knowledge becomes a cage when it is absolute. Rick's mind does not allow him the luxury of wonder. He sees the fault lines in everything. He sees the instability in systems that look solid from the outside. He sees the countless ways reality can unravel. And in his quiet thoughts, he sometimes wonders if knowing so much has stolen something important from him. Rick carries knowledge of loss too. He knows, better than anyone, what it means to lose something you cannot replace. Every time he remembers someone he cared about, he also remembers the science behind their absence. He understands the exact mechanisms of how they slipped from his life. He knows which choices triggered the chain reaction. Knowledge does not soften grief. It sharpens it. Rick's mind does not let him forget. The more he understands, the more he hurts, because insight shows him every angle of the wound. Another burden of knowledge comes from awareness of alternate realities. Rick knows there are countless versions of himself, countless versions of his family, countless versions of moments he lived differently. This knowledge fractures his understanding of identity. He questions what it means to be the real version of himself. He questions whether his choices matter when infinite variations of them play out elsewhere. This creates a quiet existential exhaustion that sits deep in his chest. Knowing too much strips meaning from things that should have mattered. Rick also knows the universe's scale and its indifference. He understands that most life forms exist by chance, that most stories end in obscurity, that most civilizations reach a limit and collapse. This makes him cynical, but it also makes him scared. Not scared for himself, but scared for the people he cares about. He knows how small they are in the cosmic system. He knows how easily they can be erased. Whenever he protects Morty or helps Beth, this knowledge sits behind every action. It is the reason he steps forward faster than he should, even when he pretends to act out of impatience. He knows too much to wait. In Rick's quietest thoughts, he sometimes wonders what it would feel like to forget even a fraction of what he knows. He imagines himself waking up without the burden of understanding every consequence. He imagines reacting to the world with instinct instead of analysis. He imagines feeling fear or happiness or awe without immediately calculating the mechanics behind it. These fantasies are brief, almost childlike, and Rick pushes them away quickly. But they leave behind a residue of longing that he cannot shake. There are times when Rick's knowledge works against him emotionally. He knows why he self-destructs. He knows why he pushes people away. He understands the psychology behind every defense mechanism he uses. This makes his actions feel predetermined, like a cycle he cannot escape. Rick often thinks about this in his quiet moments. He wonders whether intelligence helps him understand his flaws or traps him inside them. He wonders whether being aware of his damage makes it harder to change, not easier. Rick's knowledge also creates a fear he does not express openly. He fears that one day he will know too much, more than even he can bear. He fears reaching a point where understanding becomes unbearable, where the universe reveals a truth so vast or so bleak that even he cannot process it. This fear hides beneath sarcasm and bravado, but in the quiet moments, he feels it clearly. The possibility that one more revelation could break him. Rick has survived countless timelines, countless disasters, countless confrontations with the unknown, but the possibility of uncovering a truth he cannot handle lingers in the back of his mind like a soft whisper. Another heavy thought comes from watching Morty learn from him. Rick knows he is passing knowledge along, intentionally or not. He sees Morty's worldview shifting, becoming sharper, darker, more aware. Rick feels a sting of guilt each time Morty loses another piece of innocence. He never says this out loud, but the thought returns often. He wonders how much knowledge he should share and how much he should protect Morty from. He questions whether teaching Morty more about the universe is helping him or harming him. This conflict sits quietly in the background of every lesson he gives. Rick also understands the limits of knowledge. He knows that no matter how much he learns, there will always be something beyond his reach. He knows that intelligence cannot prevent loss. It cannot prevent pain. It cannot prevent loneliness. This truth frustrates him. It angers him, but it also humbles him, even if he never admits it. In his quiet thoughts, he confronts the fact that knowledge has not given him the life he wanted. It has given him survival, but not peace. The weight of knowing too much shapes Rick's behavior in ways he cannot mask. It makes him restless, because staying still gives him time to think. It makes him reckless, because caution reminds him of everything that can go wrong. It makes him distant, because closeness exposes how much he cares, and caring multiplies the weight he carries. Rick tries to drown the knowledge every day through distraction, invention, or alcohol. But knowledge always resurfaces. It is part of him in ways he cannot escape. Yet there is another side to this weight. In his quietest moments, Rick realizes that knowledge also gives him purpose. It allows him to protect the people he loves. It allows him to navigate dangers others cannot. It allows him to find solutions where others see dead ends. He may fear the weight, but he also relies on it. This contradiction confuses him, but it also keeps him moving. At night, when Rick lies awake staring into the dark, he feels the full weight of everything he knows pressing against him. But he also feels a strange relief. The knowledge is heavy, but it means he survived long enough to carry it. It means he still has the chance to use it for something meaningful, even if he pretends that meaning does not matter. And in this quiet space, Rick admits something to himself silently. He would rather feel the weight than feel nothing at all, even if it breaks him. There are places in Rick Sanchez's mind that feel sealed off, like dim rooms behind locked doors. He does not visit them often. He does not let light near them. These are the memories he keeps hidden, not only from others, but from himself. They sit deep in his consciousness, quiet and patient, waiting for the rare moments when his defenses weaken and they can surface for a few seconds. Rick pretends he does not have memories that hurt him. He pretends that the past is irrelevant, that nostalgia is a failed experiment, that regret is a useless design flaw, but the truth is different. The truth is quiet. The truth is buried. The truth is that Rick carries memories so heavy that he would rather forget himself than remember them. Rick has lived long enough to collect countless memories, more than most beings can imagine. Some are simple, some are violent, some are brilliant, some are devastating. The memories he shows the world are the ones that fit the persona he constructed, the persona that moves fast, laughs loudly, and refuses to slow down. The memories he hides are the ones that threaten that persona, the ones that expose the cracks in him, the ones that remind him of everything he has lost. These memories form the backbone of the quiet thoughts he never speaks. One of the memories Rick hides most fiercely is the moment he realized intelligence could not save him from heartbreak. He remembers standing somewhere familiar, somewhere that should have comforted him, realizing that no amount of scientific understanding could change the way someone walked away from him. He remembers the silence after the door closed. He remembers the stillness in the room. He remembers the way the light hit the floor and made everything feel empty. Rick learned that day that intelligence does not shield you from pain. He hides this memory because it contradicts everything he pretends to be. Another hidden memory lives in the look Beth gave him when she was young, a look filled with admiration and confusion and longing. Rick remembers the moment clearly, even though he forces himself not to. It was a small moment, not dramatic, but something in her eyes made him realize how much responsibility he had, responsibility he was not ready for. He remembers feeling fear mixed with pride, panic mixed with tenderness. He hides this memory because it reminds him that he was not always absent. It reminds him that he once cared deeply, and that caring created vulnerabilities he never learned to manage. Rick also hides memories of simpler times, not because they hurt directly, but because they show him what he lost without noticing. He remembers laughing with someone beside him, not because of alcohol or irony, but because he genuinely felt joy. He remembers mornings where he woke up and felt rested. He remembers entire days where he did not run from anything, where life felt quiet and real. These memories make him feel human in ways he does not want to remember. They remind him of a version of himself that could have existed if he had chosen differently. This thought scares him more than any monster he has faced. There are memories Rick hides that involve Morty too, memories that show how deeply Morty affects him. He remembers moments where Morty reached for him instinctively, trusting him without thinking. He remembers times Morty defended him when he did not deserve it. He remembers the tremble in Morty's voice during moments of fear. Rick hides these memories because they reveal how much he cares, how strong the bond is, even when he denies it. Caring makes him vulnerable. Vulnerability makes him dangerous to himself. So he hides every memory that might prove he still has the capacity to love. Some memories are darker, memories of times he made decisions that hurt people unintentionally, memories of inventions that caused more suffering than he predicted, memories of moments where anger pushed him into choices he cannot undo. Rick hides these memories because they show him the consequences of his brilliance. They show him the cost of his ego. They show him the scars he created on the people around him. He tells himself these memories do not matter, but they return in flashes when he least expects them. There are memories Rick hides so deeply that he barely recognizes them when they surface. These are the memories tied to grief. There are faces he tries not to remember, voices he tries not to hear, moments he tries not to replay. He lost people who mattered. He lost people he loved. He lost versions of himself he never got back. Rick hides these memories because grief is a weight he does not know how to carry. He tells himself that caring is a flaw, that attachment is a weakness, but the hidden memories betray him every time they rise. Some memories are tied to failures, moments where Rick was not fast enough, not clever enough, not strong enough to prevent something terrible. He remembers standing in the aftermath, watching the consequences unfold in front of him. He remembers feeling powerless, a feeling he hates more than anything else. Rick hides these memories because they show him that even he has limits. Limits terrify him. Limits threaten the persona he built to survive. Rick even hides memories of comfort, moments when someone held him, moments when softness reached him through the noise, moments when he felt safe. These memories hurt him because they remind him of what he does not have anymore. They remind him of what he believes he will never have again. They remind him that he once let someone close enough to matter. Rick hides these memories because longing is a wound he cannot heal. Sometimes, Rick's hidden memories slip through unexpectedly. A certain word will trigger them, a certain expression, a certain sound. The memory surfaces, clear and sharp, and Rick freezes for a second. His mind goes quiet, his heart beats differently. Then he pushes the memory away violently, burying it with logic and sarcasm. But the memory does not disappear. It returns later, quieter and more persistent. In his quiet thoughts, Rick often feels these memories pressing against him like whispers. They ask him questions he refuses to answer. They ask whether he regrets anything. They ask whether he misses anyone. They ask whether he wishes he could change. Rick tries not to listen. He tries to drown out the memories with noise and movement, but the memories remain, waiting for the stillness he avoids. There is a moment Rick encounters often at night. He lies down, exhausted, and his mind begins to slow. The lights dim, the machines hum quietly, his defenses soften, and in that moment, the hidden memories rise. He sees faces he lost. He feels emotions he denies. He hears echoes of moments he pretends never happened. These memories surround him, not to punish him, but because they want acknowledgement. Rick clenches his teeth, turns his head away, tries to shut them out. But for a brief moment, he remembers everything he tries to forget. These hidden memories also reveal something important. Rick once cared deeply. He cared enough to risk pain. He cared enough to dream. He cared enough to let people into parts of him he now guards fiercely. These truths terrify him because they show that he is not beyond emotion, not beyond humanity, not beyond longing. Rick hides these memories because they threaten the foundation of his emotional armor. Yet the memories are also proof that Rick is more than the persona he shows the universe. They show that he has loved. They show that he is hurt. They show that he has been hurt. They show that he has the capacity to change, even if he fears it. In his quietest thoughts, Rick knows that the memories he hides are the ones that define him the most. At night, when sleep approaches and the noise inside him fades, Rick allows himself to feel the memories for a few seconds. He does not speak them. He does not analyze them. He simply lets them exist. The memories soften him. They remind him he is still alive beneath the chaos. Then the morning comes and he buries them again. But the memories remain, and in their quiet persistence, Rick reveals the parts of himself he cannot escape. Rick Sanchez has built his life around the belief that kindness is a weakness. He mocks it. He minimizes it. He acts like it is a trait for people less evolved than him. But the quiet truth inside him, the one he keeps buried beneath sarcasm and cynicism, is that Rick performs acts of kindness constantly. He just refuses to acknowledge them, refuses to claim them, refuses to let anyone see that beneath the armor he has built, kindness still flickers in him like a small, stubborn flame. Rick's mind is so sharp that he notices opportunities for kindness before anyone else does. He sees when someone is struggling. He sees when someone is about to break. He sees when a situation calls for compassion instead of calculation. But instead of admitting that he sees it, he disguises his response as strategy or logic or necessity. He tells himself he is solving a problem, not helping a person. He tells himself he is neutral, not compassionate. His quiet thoughts expose the lie. Rick cares far more than he pretends to. One of the clearest examples of this hidden kindness is the way he protects Morty. Rick claims Morty is just a companion, a pair of hands, an accessory to his adventures. But the way he positions himself in danger, the way he responds to Morty's fear, the way he corrects Morty gently when Morty is overwhelmed, all reveal a deeper truth. Rick watches Morty closely, not out of mistrust, but out of concern. He adjusts his plans to keep Morty safe. He steps forward when Morty freezes. He shields Morty from truths that would hurt him. These are acts of kindness, even if Rick refuses to label them that way. Rick also shows kindness in the way he teaches, although he pretends his teaching is just intellectual dominance. He explains complex ideas to Morty and Summer with more patience than he gives anyone else. He simplifies concepts without talking down to them. He challenges them in ways that push them to grow. Rick's teaching is a form of connection he does not know how to express directly. His lessons are quiet gestures of care disguised as lectures. There are moments when Rick fixes something small in the house without being asked. A broken appliance, a stuck door, a piece of furniture that has been unstable for months. He does it without acknowledgement, without credit, without explanation. He pretends these acts are insignificant, but they reveal his desire to maintain the home he pretends he does not need. Kindness is present in these small gestures, hidden under layers of denial. Another subtle kindness appears in the way Rick avoids hurting people he cares about. Even when anger pushes him close to the edge, he stops himself from saying certain things. He changes the subject when he notices someone is vulnerable. He chooses silence over cruelty when cruelty would have been easier. This restraint contradicts the image he projects, an image of someone who says anything without consequence. But Rick's quiet thoughts reveal that he is aware of the power his words carry, and he uses that awareness to avoid unnecessary harm. Rick also shows kindness to strangers in moments he would never admit. He has saved lives he could have ignored. He has offered solutions to beings he owed nothing to. He has shown mercy in situations where vengeance would have been simpler. He tells himself he acts out of efficiency or boredom, but the truth is that empathy guides these decisions more than he accepts. The kindness Rick refuses to claim often appears in the way he listens. He pretends not to hear the emotional subtext in what others say, but he does. He reacts to it. He changes his behavior because of it. When Beth expresses doubt about herself, Rick becomes more careful around her, choosing words that ease her burden instead of adding to it. When Summer reveals insecurities, Rick acknowledges her strengths in subtle ways. When Jerry feels defeated, Rick sometimes steps back instead of pushing him further down. Listening is one of Rick's quiet forms of kindness, a skill he has honed even as he denies it. Another hidden kindness appears when Rick chooses presence over escape. There are moments when he could leave easily, when the world becomes too heavy, when he feels trapped, when he feels misunderstood. Rick has abandoned people before, but in recent years he often stays. He stays for Morty. He stays for Beth. He stays even when staying hurts him. This choice contradicts every survival instinct he developed over the years, but it reveals a truth he cannot deny. Staying is an act of kindness he gives without recognition. Rick's quiet thoughts about kindness always carry a layer of conflict. Part of him wants to deny every soft impulse he has. Another part wants to admit that these impulses keep him grounded, keep him human, keep him connected to a world he pretends to reject. He fears kindness because kindness requires vulnerability. Vulnerability requires honesty. Honesty requires surrender. And surrender is something Rick has never learned to do. There is a moment Rick remembers but does not speak of. A time when he helped someone without thinking, without calculation, without sarcasm. The person thanked him, and Rick felt something warm in his chest. The warmth terrified him. It reminded him of who he could be if he allowed himself to feel fully. He hides this memory because it reveals that kindness brings him comfort, not weakness. Rick also hides the kindness he shows through sacrifice. He gives up opportunities for pleasure or comfort to protect others. He takes on risks he could avoid. He absorbs danger so others do not have to. He pretends these sacrifices mean nothing, but in his quiet moments, he remembers every one of them. They leave marks on him, not because he regrets them, but because they reflect a version of himself he refuses to accept openly. The most hidden kindness in Rick is the way he forgives. He forgives others quietly, without making them earn it, without announcing it. He forgives Morty's mistakes before Morty apologizes. He forgives Beth's anger before she explains it. He forgives Summer's frustration before she softens. Rick accepts these moments without complaining, because he understands the emotional weight behind them. Forgiveness is a kindness he practices silently, even though he cannot receive it himself. In his quiet thoughts, Rick sometimes wonders why he hides his kindness so aggressively. He knows part of the answer. Kindness exposes him. It makes him visible. It makes him vulnerable to loss. But another part of him wonders whether hiding his kindness keeps him from becoming someone better. He wonders if revealing it would bring him closer to the peace he denies wanting. These thoughts are brief. He cuts them off quickly. But they return. At night, when he lies awake with the world quiet around him, Rick feels every kindness he gave that day. He feels the softness he tried to hide. He feels the warmth he refuses to acknowledge. He feels the ache of wanting to care openly and the fear that stops him from doing so. These feelings settle into him like a quiet truth. Rick Sanchez is kind in more ways than he admits. He hides it because he fears it. But the kindness remains, stubborn and alive, shaping him even when he pretends it does not exist. For all his bravado and all his deflective humor, Rick Sanchez carries a private archive of moments he wishes he could undo. He never speaks of them. He rarely thinks of them willingly. But in the stillness that settles between his thoughts, these moments surface with a clarity he cannot escape. They are snapshots of his past that sting whenever they rise. Moments he handled badly. Moments where he reacted too sharply. Moments where he turned away when he should have stayed. These regrets follow him through every timeline, every invention, every distraction. Rick wishes he could take back the moments where he pushed people away without meaning to. He remembers times when Beth looked at him with confusion or hurt. Times when Morty's face tightened after Rick snapped at him. Times when Summer tried to reach him and he brushed her off too quickly. These moments haunt him because they remind him that even the smallest dismissive gesture can make someone feel invisible. Rick hates that he sometimes becomes the very person he spent his whole life resenting. There are also moments where he acted out of fear instead of logic, though he would never admit that fear was involved. Rick remembers decisions he made in panic, choices that caused chaos, because he reacted emotionally while pretending not to. He hides these memories because they reveal a part of him he cannot reconcile with his image of mastery. He knows he is capable of losing control, and these moments show him just how fragile his composure can be. Another set of moments Rick regrets are the ones where he let his pride guide him. He remembers arguments that spiraled because he could not admit he was wrong. He remembers decisions that cost him relationships because he refused to apologize. He remembers nights he stayed silent when someone needed comfort, believing that vulnerability was more dangerous than cruelty. Pride has cost Rick so much, and in his quiet thoughts he knows it. He wishes he had bent instead of breaking. He wishes he had listened instead of dominating. He wishes he had allowed himself to be human. Rick also wishes he could take back the times he used his intelligence as a weapon. He remembers moments where he mocked someone's confusion, where he belittled their pain, where he dismissed their feelings because he did not know how to acknowledge his own. These memories sting because Rick knows he was not defending himself. He was hiding. He was pushing away connection to avoid confronting emotions he feared. In the dark, when he lets himself remember these moments, he feels something close to shame. There are regrets tied to worlds he visited too, places he altered unintentionally, lives he disrupted without meaning harm. Rick understands the vast consequences of his inventions better than anyone, and the memories of unintentional damage weigh on him. He remembers faces of people who trusted him. He remembers the silence after he left a planet worse than he found it. These regrets do not disappear just because he outruns them. Rick's most painful regrets, though, involve the people he has loved. He tries not to think about them, but he cannot erase them. He remembers moments where he chose distance instead of closeness, believing distance would protect him. He remembers times when he walked away from someone who cared about him because caring back felt too dangerous. These memories rise slowly, filled with echoes of what could have been. Rick wishes he could take back those choices, wishes he could explain that fear shaped him, not apathy. Some of Rick's regrets are tied to promises he made and never fulfilled. He remembers telling someone he would be there, then disappearing because the weight of commitment terrified him. He remembers moments where someone waited for him, hoping he would choose them over his obsessions. Rick rarely keeps promises, not because he does not care, but because promises require stability, and stability feels like an illusion he cannot trust. In his quiet thoughts, he wonders what would have happened if he had tried harder. There are moments Rick wishes he could take back simply because they revealed too much. He remembers slipping emotionally in front of Morty, revealing sincerity he never intended to show. He remembers softening in front of Beth, letting his voice crack for a second. He remembers hesitating before walking away from someone he missed. These moments frighten him because they showed him how vulnerable he still is. Rick regrets them not because they were wrong, but because they remind him of the parts of himself he cannot fully suppress. The deepest layer of regret in Rick is the moments he did nothing, the times he stayed silent while someone he cared for struggled, the times he watched pain unfold and convinced himself that intervening was pointless. Rick pretends he is detached, but he sees everything. He notices when Morty is overwhelmed. He notices when Beth avoids eye contact. He notices when Summer withdraws. He regrets every moment he pretended he did not see. He regrets every moment he could have helped, but chose not to, because action would have exposed how much he cared. There is also a specific type of regret Rick carries quietly, the regret of hurting himself. He remembers nights when he drank too much, days when he pushed himself past exhaustion, moments when he sabotaged potential happiness because happiness frightened him more than pain. Rick wishes he could take back the moments where he was cruel to his own mind, where he convinced himself he did not deserve rest, where he treated himself like an experiment instead of a person. In his quiet thoughts, Rick often replays these regrets in slow motion. He sees the expressions he caused. He hears the words he said, He feels the weight of his silence. These memories do not appear to torment him. They appear to remind him of who he does not want to become. They appear to show him the paths he could still avoid if he chooses differently. There is a moment Rick experiences often when he is alone. He lets one regret rise to the surface, just one, and he allows himself to feel it. He does not analyze it. He does not excuse it. He simply feels it. The regret softens him. It shows him that he is capable of acknowledging harm without collapsing. But the softness scares him. So he buries the regret again. This ritual repeats quietly throughout his life. Rick may never say the words, "I wish I could take that back," but he thinks them more often than anyone knows. He carries regret like a shadow. It follows him across dimensions. It sits beside him in the garage. It lingers in his quietest moments. These regrets shape him in ways he does not recognize. They soften the edges of his cynicism. They pull him gently toward moments of kindness. They influence the choices he makes when no one else is watching. At night, when the chaos fades and the world becomes still, Rick allows himself to feel the full weight of the moments he wishes he could take back. He does not let the memories define him, but he lets them exist, and in that softness, he reveals the truth he hides from everyone. Rick Sanchez regrets far more than he admits, and the fact that he carries these regrets quietly proves that somewhere inside him there is still a desire to be better. Rick Sanchez speaks constantly, but he reveals almost nothing. His voice fills rooms, fills silences, fills the space between thoughts, but underneath every joke and every cutting remark lies a truth he refuses to say. Rick believes that speaking truth gives it power. He believes that vulnerability becomes real the moment it is spoken. So he buries everything that matters. He hides every fragile truth beneath layers of brilliance and noise. But when the world goes quiet and Rick is left alone with his thoughts, these unsaid truths rise inside him like a tide he cannot control. The first truth he never says is simple. He is tired. Tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. Tired in a way that genius cannot outrun. Tired in a way that settles into his bones and stays there, no matter how far he travels. Rick feels exhaustion constantly, an exhaustion born from years of running, hiding, avoiding, and losing. But he never admits it because admitting it would force him to confront what caused the fatigue. He would have to acknowledge the emotional labor he carries, the grief he never processed, the loneliness that shapes every choice he makes. So he hides this truth behind sarcasm and energy he does not actually have. Another truth Rick never says is that he feels fear. People assume nothing scares him, but fear creeps into him quietly. He fears losing the people he has left. He fears becoming someone he cannot recognize. He fears discovering something about the universe he cannot handle. He fears his own capacity for destruction. But Rick refuses to admit fear because fear suggests weakness, and weakness is something he learned early never to show. He hides this truth by pretending everything is a game, even when the stakes threaten to break him. Rick also never admits how much he cares about his family. He cares deeply, painfully, more than he knows how to manage. When Beth speaks with frustration, he hears the tremble behind her voice. When Summer acts confident, he sees the insecurity beneath her boldness. When Morty tries to be brave, he notices every moment where Morty's hands shake. Rick sees these vulnerabilities clearly, and he feels responsible for them, even when he knows he is not. Caring is the truth he hides the most, because caring makes him fragile. Caring gives people the power to hurt him. Caring demands consistency he cannot always give. There is a truth Rick refuses to acknowledge even internally. He wants connection, He wants someone to understand him without needing explanations. He wants to share silence with someone who does not fear the chaos within him. He wants moments of comfort he did not manufacture. But connection requires trust, and trust is a risk. Rick does not believe he can survive, so he hides this longing behind detachment. He convinces himself that he prefers solitude, even when solitude feels like a wound that never heals. Another truth Rick hides is the one tied to guilt. He feels guilty for Morty's growing pain, guilty for Beth's scars, guilty for missed years and damaged memories. Rick does not let himself dwell on guilt because guilt leads to responsibility, and responsibility leads to emotional accountability, something he never learned to navigate. But in his quiet thoughts, guilt rises like a shadow. It follows him through every portal. It sits beside him when he works alone in the garage. He never speaks it aloud, but the guilt shapes him more than he admits. Rick also hides the truth that his intelligence isolates him. He knows too much, and the weight of that knowledge pushes him away from everyone around him. He understands problems no one else can comprehend. He sees patterns others cannot perceive. He anticipates outcomes before they unfold. But this comprehension creates distance, not power. Rick never says this aloud, because he built his identity around being the smartest. To admit loneliness tied to intelligence would challenge the foundation of the persona he depends on. There is another truth Rick never says, one he hides behind layers of nihilism. He wants his life to matter. He wants the things he does to have meaning. He wants to believe that he is more than a cosmic accident drifting through existence. But the possibility of meaning frightens him, because meaning creates responsibility. If life matters, then so do his mistakes, so do his choices, so do the people he pushes away. Rick hides his desire for meaning beneath declarations that nothing matters, even though the truth lives quietly inside him. The truth he hides most painfully is that he does not hate himself as much as he says. He feels frustrated with himself. He feels disappointed. He feels overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. But deep down, Rick knows he is not beyond redemption. He knows he has potential for growth. He knows he has the capacity for love and healing, even if he rejects it. Admitting this would require hope, and hope is something he fears more than despair. So he pretends to be a lost cause, even though the quiet part of him whispers that he is not. Another truth Rick never says out loud is that he misses the person he could have been. He imagines versions of himself who balanced brilliance with kindness, versions who built instead of destroyed, versions who stayed instead of running. He never speaks of these imagined selves because they reveal regret, and regret exposes longing. But these ghost versions of himself drift through his mind whenever he feels stillness. They remind him of every fork in the road he avoided. Rick never says that he envies the simplicity of others. He envies Morty's capacity for hope. He envies Summer's confidence. He envies Beth's desire to grow. He envies Jerry's ability to find meaning in small things. Rick pretends he is above these traits, but secretly he wishes his mind did not complicate everything. He wishes he could choose a simple life without tearing it apart. There is a truth Rick holds tightly, one he knows but never articulates. He is scared of change. Change requires admitting that something in him needs adjustment. Change requires acknowledging the pain that shaped him. Change requires letting go of the persona he has clung to for survival. Rick fears that if he changes, even a little, he might collapse emotionally, so he resists it. He hides the truth that part of him wants to change, while another part fears the transformation. Rick also hides the truth that he does not want to die as someone misunderstood. He pretends he does not care how he is remembered. He pretends legacy is meaningless in an infinite universe. But deep inside, he wants someone to know him fully, someone to understand the internal battles he fights, someone to recognize the quiet kindness he hides. Rick does not want to be remembered as a monster or a genius or a chaos agent. He wants to be remembered as someone who tried, even if he failed. This truth never leaves his lips because it reveals hope and vulnerability at their rawest. The final truth Rick never says out loud is the simplest. He wants to be loved, not admired, not feared, not obeyed, loved, but the idea terrifies him. Love demands trust. Love demands reciprocity. Love demands emotional presence. Rick does not believe he can maintain these things. So he hides the desire so deeply that even he tries to forget it. But the truth remains, alive and persistent in the quiet parts of him. At night, when the world feels distant and the silence wraps around him, Rick's unsaid truths rise like soft waves. He does not speak them, he does not acknowledge them, but he feels them. And feeling them, even silently, proves that Rick Sanchez is far more human than he will ever admit. Rick Sanchez acts as if the future does not matter to him. He moves through life like someone who has already seen the end of every possibility, someone who believes nothing ahead could surprise him or change him. He claims the future is irrelevant in an infinite multiverse. He claims that time has no consequence. He claims that planning ahead is for people who cannot handle chaos. But beneath that mask of indifference lies a mind full of imagined futures Rick never speaks about. Futures that frighten him, futures that tempt him, futures he pretends not to want or fear. These imagined paths shape his quiet thoughts more than he allows himself to admit. One future Rick imagines, even though he denies it instantly, is a future where Morty grows up without him. He pictures Morty becoming confident, strong, and emotionally balanced. He pictures Morty building a life that does not depend on Rick's guidance or protection, a future where Morty outgrows him. Rick imagines this with a mixture of pride and dread. Pride because he wants Morty to thrive, dread because thriving means distance, and distance means Rick will lose the one steady connection he has left. He tells himself he wants Morty to grow, but the quiet truth is that the growth scares him. It threatens the role he plays in Morty's life. Rick also imagines a future where Beth forgives him fully, where they build a relationship that feels real instead of fragmented. He imagines shared conversations that do not end in avoidance. He imagines dinners he stays for instead of leaving halfway through. He imagines admitting things he has kept buried. But this imagined future feels impossible to him because it requires consistency, something he distrusts in himself. Rick fears disappointing Beth again, so he pretends he does not imagine this future. He pretends their relationship is already as good as it can be, even though the thought of repairing it lingers inside him constantly. There is another future Rick imagines, but tries immediately to erase. A future where he becomes softer, where he learns how to rest, where he allows himself to heal. He imagines waking up without the constant pressure in his chest. He imagines working on inventions, not to distract himself, but to enjoy the process again. He imagines letting someone stay close without feeling the urge to run. This future tempts him because it offers peace. It terrifies him because it demands vulnerability. Rick pushes the thought away as soon as it forms, but it returns whenever silence gives it room. Sometimes Rick imagines a future where he stops traveling, where he chooses one dimension and lets himself belong to it. He pictures a small home with a workbench, mornings with the smell of coffee, nights where he falls asleep before sunrise. He imagines a life with fewer emergency escapes and more gentle moments. But the idea of staying still triggers his deepest fears. Staying means being seen. Staying means being accountable. Staying means allowing time to change him. So Rick pretends not to imagine this future, even though it remains one of the images he returns to most often. Rick also imagines futures shaped by fear. He imagines losing everything. He imagines Morty resenting him permanently. He imagines Beth cutting him out of her life. He imagines Summer giving up on him. He imagines becoming the monster he already believes he is capable of being. These futures appear sharply and without invitation. They frighten him more than any creature or threat he has met. Rick tries to shut them out, but they cling to the edges of his mind because they feel possible. They reflect the worst outcomes of his patterns, and Rick knows these outcomes could become reality if he continues avoiding himself. Another future Rick imagines involves his own death, though he frames it differently depending on his mood. Sometimes he imagines dying heroically, saving Morty or Beth or the entire family. Sometimes he imagines dying alone in a lab, surrounded by unfinished inventions. Sometimes he imagines dying quietly, without drama or violence, simply fading into the background of a universe that never noticed him. Rick never admits these visions because speaking of them would expose fear, hope, or longing, and he is terrified of exposing any of those. Rick also imagines a future where he outlives everyone he loves. This future terrifies him in a deeper way than death does. The thought of surviving Beth, Morty, and Summer feels unbearable, but it is a possibility that crosses his mind, often because of how long he has existed already. He imagines watching the world continue without them. He imagines walking through rooms they once filled. He imagines hearing echoes of their laughter in places where only silence remains. Rick prays in his own way that this future never comes, but he knows the universe listens to no one. Sometimes, Rick imagines a strange future, one he hates to admit even to himself, a future where he changes enough to let someone love him. He imagines conversations where he tells the truth. He imagines moments where he apologizes without defensiveness. He imagines relationships built on presence instead of avoidance. This future forms slowly, like a picture he tries to erase but keeps redrawing. It frightens him because it means letting go of the persona that saved him. But the thought persists. It reminds him that beneath everything, he still wants connection. He also imagines futures where he becomes worse. Futures where bitterness hardens him completely. Futures where he stops caring about everyone. Futures where he becomes nothing more than a weapon built from genius and despair. These futures scare him because they feel close. They feel like versions of him that already exist in other dimensions. When Rick thinks of these possibilities, he becomes more protective of the people around him, even if he does not say why. His fear of becoming worse shapes his choices more than he recognizes. There is a future Rick imagines, quietly, one that he barely lets himself acknowledge. A future where he forgives himself. He imagines waking up one day without the crushing weight of guilt. He imagines accepting that he made mistakes without letting those mistakes define him. He imagines treating himself with the kindness he gives others without realizing it. This future is the hardest for him to picture, because self-forgiveness requires confronting his pain directly. But in the quietest part of his mind, he lets the image form just for a second. Rick's most fragile imagined future is the simplest. A future where he thanks Morty sincerely. A future where Morty understands how much Rick needed him all along. Rick imagines this moment often, though he never admits it. He imagines Morty looking at him without confusion or fear, simply understanding. He imagines saying a few honest words, words that stay trapped in his throat every time he tries to speak them. This imagined future brings him comfort and pain. Comfort because it feels real. Pain because he does not believe he deserves it. At night, when the house is quiet and the air settles into stillness, Rick allows these imagined futures to drift through his mind. He does not stop them, he does not speak them, he simply watches them move like distant stars. Some futures frighten him, some tempt him, some break his heart, some mend it. All of them exist because Rick still hopes for something, even if he refuses to say it out loud. Rick Sanchez pretends he does not imagine the future, but the quiet parts of him dream constantly, revealing the truth he hides, that he still wants tomorrow to be different from today. There is a kind of peace Rick Sanchez does not speak about, the kind of peace he avoids even when it stands directly in front of him. It is not the peace of empty space or silent rooms or distant galaxies. Those places bring quiet, but not peace. Rick knows the difference. Quiet is the absence of noise. Peace is the absence of fear. And fear is something Rick carries through every dimension he enters. He believes peace is something other people receive, something he forfeited long ago through choices he can never undo. Yet, in the quiet passages of his mind, he often imagines what peace might feel like, even though he does not believe he deserves it. Rick has lived long enough to experience countless kinds of relief, but relief is temporary. It is a pause, not an ending. Peace is different. Peace is a place to rest, not a moment to pass through. The problem is that Rick cannot imagine resting without feeling guilty for it. Guilt follows him everywhere he goes. It seeps into every calm moment, every still breath, every early morning when he wakes, and the world feels soft instead of sharp. He does not trust softness. He does not trust quiet joy. He does not trust anything that asks him to surrender the defenses he built over a lifetime. The idea of peace frightens him because it would require him to stop running. Rick has spent years using motion as a shield. Every adventure, every portal jump, every risk he takes is another way to avoid the silence that waits beneath his actions. Peace would force him to stand still. Stillness would force him to acknowledge the emotions he has spent decades burying. He tells himself he prefers chaos, but the truth is that chaos is easier than reflection. Reflection demands honesty, and honesty demands courage. Rick does not believe he has. In Rick's quiet thoughts, he sometimes imagines what peace could look like if he were brave enough to pursue it. He imagines mornings without urgency, mornings where he wakes without the impulse to escape. He imagines walking into the kitchen and sitting with his family without pretending he is indifferent to their presence. He imagines small conversations that do not require sarcasm or distraction. He imagines reaching for a cup of coffee because he wants it, not because he needs something to hold on to. These images feel warm, almost too warm, and Rick always pushes them away quickly. There is a version of peace Rick imagines reluctantly, a peace built on forgiveness, not forgiveness from others, but forgiveness for himself. He imagines looking at the past without flinching. He imagines acknowledging the hurt he caused without drowning in shame. He imagines accepting his flaws without using them as proof that he is unworthy of softness. This imagined peace feels the most distant of all. Rick does not believe forgiveness is something he has earned, and he is terrified of even considering the possibility. In his mind, forgiveness feels like the luxury of people who made mistakes, not people who destroyed entire dimensions of potential happiness. There is another kind of peace Rick longs for even though he denies it. The peace of connection. He imagines conversations where he does not need to hide. He imagines moments where someone listens without fear. He imagines sitting next to someone who understands him enough to let the silence speak. He imagines being able to say the words he has kept inside for years. But connection requires trust, and trust is a risk Rick believes always ends badly. So he buries these imagined connections beneath layers of cynicism, even though the desire for them remains strong. Rick also imagines the peace of acceptance. Acceptance of who he is, acceptance of what he has done, acceptance of what he cannot change, acceptance of the limits of his own power. Rick hates the idea of limits, but he hates the idea of running forever even more. Acceptance feels like surrender, yet it also feels like freedom. He imagines letting go of the pressure to be the smartest, the strongest, the most unbreakable. He imagines being allowed to simply be, but this kind of peace feels dangerous to him because it would require him to stop proving himself. He has spent so long proving himself that he does not know who he would become without that need. There is a quieter kind of peace Rick dreams of without realizing it. The peace of boredom. A day without crisis. A day without cosmic danger. A day where nothing drastic happens. He imagines spending an afternoon fixing something in the garage, not because it matters, but because it passes time gently. He imagines lying down and feeling the comfort of a pillow instead of the jolt of a new idea. He imagines walking outside and letting sunlight hit his face without thinking of all the ways the universe can collapse. This peace feels simple, but Rick does not trust simplicity. He fears that if he lets himself settle into a quiet moment, the universe will punish him for it. Rick's fear of peace also comes from a belief he formed long ago. He believes that peace is reserved for people who have earned it, people who tried, people who stayed, people who cared openly. Rick does not see himself as one of those people. He sees the damage he caused far more vividly than the kindness he gave. He sees the failures more clearly than the attempts. In his mind, peace is a reward, and he does not believe he qualifies. This self-judgment keeps him running even when he is exhausted beyond measure. There are moments when peace approaches him unexpectedly. Moments when Morty leans against him without thinking. Moments when Beth hugs him tightly. Moments when Summer shares something with him that she would not tell anyone else. Moments when Jerry smiles at him with genuine gratitude. In these small moments, a quiet warmth rises in Rick's chest. It feels peaceful. It feels gentle. It feels like something he wants to hold on to. But the moment he notices it, fear overtakes him. He pushes the moment away mentally, even if he does not push the person away physically. Peace feels too much like hope, and hope is something he refuses to trust. But peace continues to follow him. It slips into the spaces where his defenses weaken. It appears in the softness with which he adjusts Morty's collar before they leave on a trip. It appears in the way he pauses for a second longer when Beth calls him Dad. It appears in the rare but real moments when he looks at his family and feels something close to love. Rick tries to bury these moments, but they leave traces in his quiet thoughts. Traces of something he cannot name without feeling exposed. There is a type of peace Rick never admits he wants, the peace of a second chance. He imagines having time to rebuild what he broke. He imagines having another chance to choose presence instead of avoidance. He imagines becoming someone who stays when things get difficult. This imagined peace feels like a dream he has no right to hold, but he holds it anyway in the secret corners of his mind. The thought that he could become better frightens him because it suggests that change is possible. Change threatens every emotional wall he built for protection. Rick also imagines a peaceful end. Not a heroic death, not a violent confrontation, but a quiet ending. an ending where he is not alone, an ending where he closes his eyes, knowing he changed something for the better, an ending where he is remembered not for his genius, but for his attempts to be human. Rick never speaks of this imagined ending, but it is one of the clearest images in his quiet thoughts. It is the kind of peace he desires, but feels unworthy of. The truth he hides, even from himself, is that he does deserve peace, not because he is perfect or redeemed, but because peace is not a prize. It is a state of rest human beings need, even the broken ones, even the brilliant ones, even the ones who made mistakes. Rick has spent so long punishing himself that he forgot peace is not mercy. Peace is balance. Peace is stillness that follows chaos. Peace is understanding without judgment. Peace is letting go. At night, when Rick lies down and the world around him softens into darkness, he feels peace hovering near him. It does not ask anything from him. It does not demand change. It simply waits. It whispers that he can stop running for a moment, that he can rest, that he can breathe. Rick feels this presence and turns away from it, afraid of how good it might feel, afraid of how much he might want it. But even as he turns away, the peace remains close, patient, and quiet. Rick Sanchez may never speak of peace. He may never choose it fully, but the quiet truth inside him reveals something important. He still hopes for it, he still imagines it, and somewhere in the deepest part of his consciousness, he still believes that one day, even for a moment, he might find it.